In the Huddle was created to give student athletes, parents and coaches an inside look at the journey through US college sport and all that comes with it. The demands, the experiences, the excitement and the opportunities available to our student athletes from around the world. Study and Play USA facilitates a comprehensive, customised approach for student athletes and families for their whole journey, from their high school preparation years right through to US college graduation. In this episode of In the Huddle, we are going to delve into some of the intriguing topics that come up every year in our team conversations and our interactions with families across the world. These are topics that are absolutely critical for some families as they navigate their way through to the decision-making phase of this process. To help us, we welcome a special guest whose perspective is unique. She is US born and she split her life between living in Australia and the USA. She has an elite sporting background, particularly in soccer, and she is also the newest member of the Study and Play USA team. Welcome to In the Huddle, Claire Mulligan.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome to have you here. I'm looking forward to hearing your insights because I think from our off-air conversations, you have a really important perspective of this US college system that our listeners can benefit from. I think the thing I've learned already from talking with you is that the process of finding a suitable college differs for an Australian family perhaps, as opposed to a US family who have grown up in that environment. And I think it probably comes down to different cultures and different knowledge of the USA system, and there's far more variables that we can delve into as well. So I think, why don't we just start with telling us a little bit about the Claire Mulligan story so far?
So I grew up in the United States, in California, and I am the daughter of an American and an Australian. I have a twin sister as well who also played elite level sport. I came to Australia when I was 18, and I've absolutely loved it ever since. And I'm very happy to be here. And yeah, so my story is that I went through the whole recruiting process and I went through the whole soccer experience. I played elite level, talked to coaches myself, had coaches approach me, went through the process of deciding if I wanted to play college soccer, and ultimately, due to many different factors, majority being the fact that I really wanted to come to Australia, was why I actually decided to come to Australia and play soccer in Australia. So it was a very different experience than playing college soccer in America, but I wouldn't change a thing. It was amazing, and I'm really, really happy I did it. And I think in this podcast, you'll kind of hear differences between my thoughts about American sport versus Australian sport and the similarities between what I've noticed for kids in the US versus kids in Australia.
Yeah, I think I'm excited to sort of share that with people because there are a lot of differences. So I think just listening to you do that, really what you've experienced is quite the opposite to what we're doing, right? Trying to prepare student athletes to go to America, where you kind of did the same thing and went through a very similar process in reverse, coming out to Australia, which is very unusual. Not many Australians coming here not many Americans coming to Australia for university. So that's an interesting perspective to begin with. So yeah, what were you said that you don't regret coming down here, and obviously you've got a family connection to Australia. Was that the main reason you came to Australia, or were there other reasons?
So the main reason I came, my parents met at the University of Queensland in the International House dormitory.
Cool.
So I wanted to do the same thing, and I have an Australian passport, so I wanted to be able to come and use that passport. And I guess in a sense of Australian kids wanting to go to the US to play sport, I wanted to be able to use my once in a lifetime opportunity to come to Australia with my passport and go to university in Australia. So I kind of did the opposite of what people are doing through the company, but I just thought it was a really unique opportunity, and I could still play soccer. I could still play at a high level if I wanted to. And I'm really happy that I was able to do that. And a lot of people said, "Oh, you're so brave going," but I didn't think it was brave. This is what I wanted to do. So
yeah, you were very clear on what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
But I do think that's a brave move at that age. I think it's for any of our student athletes going to America as well. I think it's a there's a lot of people who wouldn't do it. So I think it is something that we can consider brave. And you've got, again, the unique situation that you've grown up with a twin sister who is also involved in elite sport. But, again, from our conversations, you mentioned, although you've got obvious similarities, you've gone different ways in terms of career and where you took your sport, right?
Yes. So she did nursing in university and I did teaching, and we both wanted to work with children, but we just chose two different pathways with that. She ended up working with children with nursing. And she knew, as well as we all kind of knew, that nursing was a very intense degree that would take a lot of time away from the sporting field. She had a lot of practicals that she had to do. She had a lot of contact at school. She had way more hours at school than I did in general. And she was in the library a lot. She was studying. It was just very intense degree for her. So she knew that she probably wouldn't be able to play at the highest elite level that she wanted to because of the fact that this was her degree. And she knew that her degree was more important to her. That was what she individually knew. And so she chose to go to a university that had a very good nursing program. And she actually ended up walking on to a D1 team. And we can talk more about the D1 walk-on process later. But she knew that this program that she was entering was immediate admission to the nursing program. She did not have to do 2 years of general studies to then start nursing.
Right.
It was really important for her to start straight away as a freshman in nursing. So although she had offers from different schools for soccer, she ended up going to this university on her own academic merit and had talked with the coach before, but wasn't really a selling point at all for her. And she knew that this is what she wanted to do. And she also chose this school because of the study abroad program for nursing. So for her, it was extremely important to study abroad. And so she knew that she wanted to go to this school because many nursing programs did not have study abroad options.
Right. It's interesting. So she was very clear on what she wanted, and therefore the process was probably a little bit easier for her to choose a college. How did it go down from a soccer point of view? She's obviously turned down a strong program with a good reputation, Division 1, which a lot of people would dream of. And then she's chosen to go to for lack of a better word, a lower level program from a soccer point of view, but it had what she wanted, and probably from a reputation point of view in general, right? As a university.
Yep.
How did that go down amongst family, friends in America?
So people were very surprised that she was accepted into other universities and chose not to go to the well-known name universities. And she chose to go to a lesser known university with a really strong basketball program. So some people had heard of it because the basketball program was really good, but she knew, and she was very clear with what she wanted out of her education. So for her, she had no issues with what people were kind of saying out of surprise, but people were definitely surprised that she did not say yes to some of the schools that she was accepted into.
And she's turned out all right.
She has, and she absolutely loved what she did. So she had a little bit of a different experience where she walked on to actually a lacrosse team.
Just before we go any further, just so for some listeners won't know what walked on mean, what does that actually mean?
So she went to the school, she got accepted for the university on her academics. She was accepted, she started the university as a freshman and contacted the coach and asked to try out for the team. So that the university had their main Division 1 team that travels and competes against other Division 1 teams, but then they also had a club program as well that was pretty high level as well. So she had the choice of doing club lacrosse or doing Division 1 lacrosse. So she found out very quickly that she was able to walk on and make the team. So she was accepted, made the team, started training, and then realized very quickly that the yoga, the weightlifting, the watching of game footage, it was just way too much with her degree. And again, her northern star, her shining star of what she wanted to do was to study abroad and to do nursing. So she knew that that schedule was not going to work. And because she was very happy at the university as a whole, and she had chosen that university as a whole, she had no issues with saying, thank you for kind of the tryout, thank you for accepting me on the team, but this is actually not going to work. So she left the team and joined the club lacrosse team and had a great time playing lacrosse, but it fit with her schedule as a nurse.
So she was in more control of the her schedule by being a walk-on / reserve non-scholarship athlete and playing for the club team. Yeah, that's interesting. I think what I'm hearing she's just one example, of course, your sister, but clarity of purpose, I think, is such an important thing in this process. And obviously we've been doing this a long time, for 18, 19 years now. And obviously as our newest member, you've already seen the differences, I suppose, that Australians, I guess the different experience of trying to find the right college from Australia, in a lot of cases never having been to America.
Right.
Versus an American who's grown up knowing, what's out there and where they fit and where they might sit with their sport, what they might want to study and all those sort of things. So I think, what I'd probably just want to touch on is probably touching on the subject of choosing a college, and just delve into that a little bit, because I think that is going to be the most helpful information for families, because I think there is a lot of lack of clarity to begin with, and sort of start the process, start talking to universities, but they're not really sure what they want. They're sort of learning from those conversations and then learning on the run, which is sometimes right in the middle of high school, year 12, and that can be difficult to navigate. So, talk us through, do you think, from not necessarily from your own perspective, but just in general, if you talk on behalf of an American high school student, what's the process of choosing a college? When does it start, and what are the important considerations for an American boy, girl, family in choosing the right college, and when does it start, do you think?
So we have college counselors at high school that do what a lot of Australian college counselors would do as well. You have information about different degrees you can study in different universities. The glaring difference is the fact that there's about 40 Australian universities and thousands of American universities. So there was many that none of us had ever heard of, that would send pamphlets to the school, would have prospective student days at the school from the university representatives would come and talk. So as an American student athlete in high school, it's a little bit different to just a regular student who wants to go to university. We looked at, as an American student, I would say we looked at the scholarships that were available. Some schools are just notorious for having a lot of scholarship for academic merit. Some are notorious for being very expensive and not admitting very many people. You kind of just know based on your grade point average what is accessible to you and what's not. But then you also have the cases of, if you're not as a high achieving student, there's many, many different essays that you can write and different ways that you can still get accepted to the school that I think a lot of Australians may not be aware of.
Yes.
And there's specific programs at specific universities that target kids that want to do that course. So for example, I knew that I wanted to be a teacher from when I was in grade 5, like I was absolutely sure. And I wanted to do primary school teaching. And so I researched a lot of the really interesting primary school teaching programs in the US. So that was also while I was researching soccer programs. So it was kind of both at the same time. And I ended up becoming really interested with immediate entrance into the classroom. So for me, it was important to have as much classroom experience as possible. Some universities, you could not get into the classroom until your end of your sophomore year, beginning of your junior year. And I did not want that. I wanted to start straight away. And that was also kind of what I was very clear on. So I think for me, it was thinking about, in general, what kind of climate do I want to live in? In general, how big of a school do I want to go to? In general, do I want to stay in that state after university? In general, are there partnerships with that university with sporting teams that you might want to do an internship at, or a certain organization that's founded in that city? There's just so many different things because there's so many universities that each university has so many unique perspectives and unique opportunities for a student. So I think because there's only 40 here, you kind of know a lot about each university, but in in America, there's just thousands, and so you hardly know anything about most of them unless you do your research.
Yeah, and so one thing I just took from that snippet there is, firstly, it's not a one-size-fits-all, even just within your degree. So, there's a certain way I want to do my degree. I want to make sure I've got a high practical experience as a teacher in the classroom as soon as possible, versus university, who's going to make sure it's theoretical for the first bit. So even that itself, that to me, when you've got so many universities, you've got so much more choice and different ways you can mix and match. I just think that's a really big point of difference. And again, I'm not here saying, look, obviously our job is to help find the best fit for student athletes in America. So you could argue that we're quite biased towards the American system, but there's nothing wrong with the Australian university system. That's not what we're saying. It's just pointing out these differences, which I think can help when you're embarking on this process, just to be aware of. And I think we start a little bit late. We might touch on that a little bit later, but I feel like in Australia, we probably start this process of thinking a little bit late, where by nature, being in America, knowing that there are so many options, those playground conversations, maybe as a freshman in high school, a 14-year-old is starting and say, hey, where do you want to go to college? Where do you go? Yeah, I really want to get into this one because I love the great big college atmosphere that I'm going to get at that university. I get to go to these football games, these wrestling matches, basketball, whatever it might be, which is going to make my experience exciting as well. So again, we probably don't have that in Australia. There are probably locations we might want to be in Australia because that are nicer than others, but in America, you've got that big college experience that may appeal, and the small town might appeal to some as well.
Right. And I was sure that I wanted a 50,000 person massive school.
No less.
No less. And I was very sure that I wanted a big sporting school. I wanted to not know everyone I walked past. I wanted a very massive, big experience.
Yeah.
And then I ended up doing a road trip in my third year of high school. So junior year of high school. And I went on a big road trip with my family to look at universities as well, to talk to coaches. And my perspective completely changed. And I was recruited by a school in Oregon that was very small, and the coach was absolutely lovely and super nice. And he said to me, you would be a starter and you'd play every game, and was just kind of talking to me about that. And I had never really considered a school of that size. And then I went and visited and really liked it, and really liked the girls on the team. And that also kind of rocked my world a bit with what I thought that I wanted.
Yes.
So I think it's really, really important to have an open mind throughout the whole entire process. And some schools may be massive, but have a really not so great degree that you're trying to do. Or some really small school might have the most amazing engineering program and you've never heard of it, but then you start researching it and realize, wow, this engineering program is leaps and bounds ahead of this other school that is name recognized and that I actually really want to go to. So it's just amazing how many opportunities there are out there. Yeah,
I think you've got the benefit of being in America, being able to see those. Not every Australian's going to go and do that and have those physical experiences. Which is why we encourage families to probably start a bit earlier and just make up for lost time a little bit that you can't have by being in America. So through the process. So just being aware of what's out there, and I suppose our model that we try and walk our families through in the best possible way is to be educated by the interactions with these coaches is generally the first port of call with most of our student athletes, and then, as you say, meet your potential teammates and get their perspective. You may absolutely fall in love with them, and get your own little WhatsApp group going, or you might not get a really good feeling from them. Right. And so that's really important. But it does bring me to the next topic before we finish off with some I'm going to ask you for some tips shortly, Claire. But I think, what are the biggest considerations in choosing a college, do you think? Now, knowing Australians, having the US perspective that you've got as well, and knowing the types of people we are, maybe culturally slightly different in Australia, I guess our size, our location, our knowledge of the US system, all of that being considered, what do you think are the biggest important considerations for choosing a college? You've talked about size of college, you just hinted at, okay. But what are some other things you think are crucial for considering the right college?
I think deciding geographically where you would like to be was very important for me. And I think a lot of Australians may kind of forget how massive the US is. And even if you travel 1 hour within a state, it's a completely different environment. And so geographically, I would say is quite important. Do you want to be in freezing ice every time you walk outside? Or do you want to have gentle light snow that you can kind of pretend like you're in a movie? Or do you want a beach? Do you want a little bit of a mixture of things? Do you want to be close to amazing travel? Do you want to be close to nature? Do you want to be close to all kinds of different opportunities that city has to offer? Because I think a lot of times people can tend to forget that the university sometimes is the city. So there's obviously universities that are their own small college town. There's universities that are in the middle of nowhere. There's universities that are in the metropolitan downtown city center, which doesn't appeal to everyone either.
Yep.
Then there's also, when choosing a college, if you're doing a sport as well, is that sport on campus? Do you have to travel away to go to the training fields? All of that kind of stuff is really important as well.
Yep.
And my sister ended up going to a school where they had cold days and they weren't allowed to leave outside their dorm because it was too cold. If she didn't blow dry her hair would freeze. That's just something I've never had to experience and I never want to. So I had no interest in going to the school that she did.
Yeah.
She really enjoyed it, but I had no interest with that. So I think someone may think, oh, I'd like a change of weather, but then the reality of the actual weather can be so different.
Yes.
To what they may think.
And everything you just said there, again, to me, also have a good idea, be educated, do your research, but also in around that, be open-minded as well, right? Because what you think maybe at the start of year 11 is what you're going to start out looking at may change as well.
Yes.
So being open-minded, being educated about all the different types of scenarios, climates, size of school, that sort of stuff, I think is pretty important. Interestingly, obviously being in Oklahoma where I was, I didn't realise it was windy. It turned out to be a really good thing for my tennis because I loved playing in the wind, but it was freezing and we had to often go play indoors, which is something I just didn't even consider.
Yeah.
That said, I didn't have internet or anything like that back then when I was going to college, but that's another story. All right. So, look, I think what you're saying, you're giving some really good advice here. In our experience, there are barriers and disadvantages sometimes for doing this process as an Australian. And there are things, if you looked at it the other way, there are things that Australians can do to really avoid those and make sure they're maximising the outcome of their offers and obviously maximising their college experience when they do go over. So we might just finish off with some tips, I think. Look, we've talked again pre-podcast of 5 tips that we can discuss with families. Do you want to just walk us through those? And I'll obviously add my thoughts as well. But what do you think? Just give us top 5 tips for trying to maximise this experience for our Aussie kids.
So one of the things that I think is the most important, which culturally I grew up with a lot of this, and I notice it's not as big here, is to have an outside independent person come and assess you. So a one-on-one training session or having someone come and watch your games and give you feedback. I think that's really invaluable. And I think that even if you're an individual sport versus a team sport, it's really important to know what you can work on and what you can do to get to the next level. And I think the earlier that you start with that, which is one of my other tips, is better. So say you're in grade 9 and you think, oh, I'd like to do this pathway. And then you think, okay, so this is my level now. Someone's going to come assess me in grade 9. I have all these goals to work towards. I can do it in my own backyard. I can do one-on-one sessions. I can practice it in a game and have this outside person come and watch me and then improve as time goes on. So maybe, technically speaking, you're maybe at like a junior college level in grade 9 or a little bit on the lower side, and you can improve substantially in 2 or 3 years to get to the level that you may want.
Would you recommend that independent set of eyes potentially be a college coach or a retired college coach who knows the US system and what coaches look for, or would it more so just be a technical feedback specifically on your sport, or or do you think it's better to have an American being that independent set of eyes, or
it
local?
Depends. I think it depends on who you get. So I've noticed that the Australian coaching system, at least for soccer, is substantially different to where I grew up. So I personally, if I was a grade 9 female soccer player in Australia, I would want a foreign coach to be watching me and to be assessing me. Doesn't necessarily have to be American, but just foreign. And I think that for me, just my experience, I would want a foreign person to be observing.
So in that case, would it be just a case of putting a skills video together, sharing it if they weren't available physically to come and watch, and just asking for some feedback?
Yeah, so you could even send footage if you're in grade 9 or something. You could have your parents film and you could send footage to someone, like Study and Play could help you with finding someone to send it to. They could review it and send it back to you, or you could get someone in your city to come and have a look and give you feedback. I think the more feedback you get, the better.
Yeah.
In general, from all kinds of different people. I think subjectiveness for team sports can be really hard.
Yeah.
And that was something that I found that I forgot to touch on was when I was growing up, you would play against girls like, okay, this girl's going to Stanford and this girl's my age and she's going to Princeton. This girl my age is going to this college, and you know your level based on the fact that you're playing against them. So
Yes.
you kind of know where you're going to fit.
Yep.
So I can definitely see that it's a little bit potentially overwhelming for Australians that don't exactly know where they stack up.
Yeah.
So to get that feedback from an outside body, I think is really important. It's no disregard to their regular coaches. It's just
Yes.
really good to have a separate set of eyes.
Additional. Yeah. Exactly. Because I think particularly in soccer, correct me if I'm wrong, it's the style of play can differ from club to club, from coach
Yes.
to coach, country to country,
Yeah.
and there's a certain Australian way of playing probably as
Yeah.
opposed to Spanish versus,
Yeah.
US, I'd imagine. Yeah. So look, that's 2 tips. So getting an outside independent set of eyes for some really valuable feedback. You mentioned starting earlier this process, and I think I just wanted to touch on that too, just really quickly before we finish with the other 3 tips. The starting earlier is necessary for Aussies because this is an educational process in itself, finding out how am I going to choose. So in Australia, I think I would say from my experience and observation over many years that most Australian families start thinking about uni no earlier than year 11. Some will, obviously, but I would say most, maybe as late as year 12, start thinking about it. Now, given that you are trying to go to America, not just to find a university, but you're trying to find a university that fits with your sport and your study.
And who you are as a person.
And who you are,
Yeah.
exactly, and what you want and what aligns with your goals, etc. You need time. So you need time to be educated. And the best way to be educated, obviously, is Study and Play USA staff. That's our job. But the best education also is learning from these coaches, and you can't learn from coaches unless they've seen some footage, and you've got to go through all that phase first. So starting early is important. I know, again, we've talked about this, but if you were to have a daughter who was in beginning high school here in Australia, Claire, as an example, how early is too early, for you, or not too early, but what is early?
I would say if I was a parent that had a year 9 female soccer player or any sport in grade 9, I would say start by signing up with Study and Play USA, not from a business perspective of me saying that to get more people to sign up. It's just that I was absolutely shocked in a really positive way at how many resources are available through Study and Play USA, webinars, podcasts, all the access to the staff. There's just so much knowledge that you can get. And if you wait a bit, you can't really make up that time. So because the fee is a one-off fee that you're paying, you get that whole entire amount of knowledge throughout however early you start. So I would say if I had a daughter in grade 9 playing soccer, I would say, okay, start with getting an assessment on what you think you need to work on positionally, independently, technically, making sure you kind of get a general gauge of where do you want to go, what kind of level do you want to achieve, and then you can keep working towards that. If you want to play in the college pathway and you kind of just float through and you kind of just hope for the best, you're not maximizing your opportunities. And I think culturally in America, we're very, from my experience at least, especially in high school, we are assessed and marked on very technical aspects, even in PE. So we had lots of different marks that we had to hit to get certain grades for sport. So that kind of translates to, okay, if you want to play in the US college pathway system, aim for these targets, and you know that you can achieve more scholarship money if you can achieve these targets.
Yeah.
Especially for rowing, with the times for rowing, or with track and field, you have the times that you have to hit.
Yeah.
It's just so beneficial to have the knowledge of what times or what markers you need to hit from an early age.
Yeah.
So you don't get to grade 11 or 12 and go, oh my gosh, I only have 3 months to get my rowing time down by a minute.
Yes.
It's just stuff like that. The earlier you start, the better. You just have so much more time.
Yeah. And the point you make there is that the US system, or the US athletes that are in that pool of potential student athletes that are potentially taking your spot, is they know this. They grow up with it. They know where they stand. So you've got to get that education about where you stand and what you need to work on to hit certain markers.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. Okay. So look, couple of other tips that you want to share with us, Claire? I know there's a couple that we discussed before.
So we discussed as well, if you're lucky enough to know what you want to study, what course you want to study, you don't have to know, but if you do know, you can do your research on programs that you're really interested in. And I think the biggest misconception is that quote unquote big name schools have the best programs, and that's not always the case. There's some universities that people in America may have never heard of either that have very specific, really high level engineering programs or aerospace programs, and that's very specific to that university. And I think it's really important to research if you know what you want to do.
Okay, case in point, your sister, right?
Yes.
And in terms of, like, a lot's made of the coach, and I suppose our position at Study and Play USA is the coach is an important factor in making a choice of college, but it's what you're looking for in a coach, I think, is the key, right? So do you want to talk about, the importance of the coach in your decision making process?
So this is a really interesting one. I grew up with a wide variety of coaches, which is my background on why I'm answering the question the way that I am. I grew up with very blunt, direct, foreign coaches who were pretty serious and a little bit intense, but were very, very good coaches, usually professional players that have been injured and can't go back to playing, with assistant coaches that were managers and more of the nurturing side. And that's what I grew up with for many years.
Nice blend of the two.
Nice blend.
Yeah.
So I did not expect my head coach to be the be all end all of amazing coaching, amazing human being, amazing mentor, amazing support system, because I usually had a blend.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say as time went on, when I got older, I had all the technical skills. So then when I came across a team that was winning championships and was really enjoying being together as a team, where the coach was a lovely guy, so nice, great intentions, but just really not a good coach, I was happy to stay because I had all that technical experience behind me and I knew how to play from the previous coaches.
Yeah.
So I was more than happy to enjoy my time with the girls, the team, and know that I wasn't necessarily being coached by a really high level coach, but the girls around me were pulling me up. And I was playing with 18-year-olds when I was 14 and they were teaching me. So all that kind of stuff was, I valued later. I think that it depends on the person. If they want a really high level intense coach their whole experience, then that's something for them to kind of reflect on. But because I had both experiences, I actually had both experiences as well when I moved to Australia. I had really high level good coaches, and I had a really nice guy, not so great coach. Like, it's just same thing. I had the exact same thing again. And because I had that experience, I was happy to stay. I also, something for me to consider was I was injured a lot. So I had really bad knees when I was about 14, and I was wearing knee braces a lot, and I had foot problems. So fast forward, I've had 5 soccer surgeries, and I kind of knew that I wouldn't potentially always be healthy and able to play. So I also kind of knew that I wanted a team where that would be okay, that I wasn't competing for spots all the time, because I couldn't actually compete because I was injured a lot. So then again, does a coach facilitate an environment where he or she wants the players to compete for spots? That's also something to think about. Do you want a coach that is going to push you to your absolute limit and be very blunt or direct? Or do you want a coach that is going to kind of just float along and hope that everything will be great and kind of nurture you and be really lovely, but you don't really progress as a player?
Yeah, that's good. At the end of the day, what you're saying is be clear on what you want, because if you know what you really want, then that's when we put student athletes through that process of meeting with coaches, that the questions that we'll work with you to ask those will be geared around those goals. So have a good self-reflection, I think, is important, isn't it? Make sure you know what you're really looking for. And again, be open-minded to that maybe changing. And I think the other thing you mentioned off the podcast was you may well be meeting with the head coach, the entire recruiting process, or the assistant coach, one or the other. Very important before you make a decision to ask to meet the whole team, as in the whole coaching staff, if possible, because at the end of the day, you're going to spend a lot of time with them. And so who's going to be doing the on-field coaching? Well, if it's not the person that you've been recruited by, then you probably need to meet that person and feel comfortable with him or her, right?
And also know that that person may leave for various reasons. There's just so much turnover in college sport with coaching. So it's so important to know, okay, if I go to this school and this coach leaves, which is a very real possibility in any division, will I still be happy at the school? Will I still like my teammates? Will I still like the division that I'm in? That kind of thing. I think that's very, very important.
I love that one, because it is. We're seeing that, more often. So don't get too fixated on just the coach being your number one choice. Important, yes, but you've also got to have other non-negotiables with that university that's going to make it an enjoyable experience regardless of what happens with the coach. Okay, one more tip. Again, off air, we did talk about this a little bit in terms of it's just be clear on what you're looking for. But you'd want to expand on that in terms of the overall experience.
So I knew that I did not want to be fighting for a spot every week. That was not who I was as a player. I did not want to be having really hectic training sessions where girls were undermining me in order to get a position, which is very real and very possible. And I know people that's happened to, where the team culture is not intense and not what they wanted. I knew that I wanted to have a balance. I wanted to be able to travel to different states. I wanted to be able to go on hikes. I wanted to be able to work if I wanted to, which as an American was fine because I wasn't on a visa. So I wanted to be able to have a balance and not be completely defined by my training schedule, my gym schedule, yoga, weights, all of that. I did not want that to dictate my day-to-day life. So I was really happy to redetermine what I wanted out of a school sporting environment based on that. So I think some kids that I've noticed may do this process thinking that because they are a specific level that they should be going to that level. But then there's also the possibility of, if I'm very, very high level, I still definitely have the possibility of going to a lower division if I want to have a life balance. Or maybe I'm really interested in the internships that this school provides, and I want to really focus on that as well as playing sport, and I want to enjoy my day-to-day balance. I think that's really important. But again, each person's different, and it's so important to think about what you want as an individual. And comparison is I think the saying is comparison is the thief of joy. If you compare to someone maybe who's on your team currently or your training partner, in what they did, they might have a different perspective on what they want their day-to-day to look like. They may want to be an Olympian and you have no interest in being an Olympian, or they may want to break school records and you have no interest in that. It's just, comparison is the thief of joy.
Totally agree. And look, to very, very quickly summarize that, because that's some amazing little snippets of gold there. Thank you very much, Claire. Start early so that you can be educated about your level, you know what to work on, but also be educated about what college is all about, what kind of things do I need to be considering. And then now that you know, okay, I think now that I know that, I want to be in that system, and then be open-minded from there. I think that's reasonably, if I summarise that well, do you think?
Yep. And open mind is the biggest thing, for sure.
Really good. Oh, that's a good note to finish on, Claire. I think we'll be doing this again. That was very enjoyable, and really appreciate your insight.
Thanks for having me.